Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Okay, so I will admit to sometimes looking longingly at businesses who operate indoors and whose product doesn't just die or walk away or get eaten by wildlife. But the good news is that there are a number of ways that we can shield ourselves from the whims of nature on our farm. So, let's do it. Droughts, heat waves, torrential rain, heavy winds, sometimes all three in the same week, whatever the issue, we want to make sure our farms are equipped to handle it. Now, obviously, there are going to be catastrophes like Hurricane Helene that will just be entirely too large to really prepare for. And we have added a few links in the show notes about how to support farmers affected by that hurricane. But the hope here is that some of the advice in this video will put all of us in a better position should any size disaster, from as small as a crop loss to as big as a flood, strike. So I'm going to discuss some soil management practices, some infrastructural things, and yep, infrastructural is a word. Some infrastructural things and some planning stuff, starting with, to me, arguably the most important of all things one can do to fortify a farm against the elements. But first, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the amazing folks making this episode possible, Patagonia Workwear. Patagonia Workwear supports folks who bust their butts on the daily to leave our home planet better than they found it. They build durable, timeless gear for the ones who prove that food production, skilled trades, construction, and ecosystem restoration can and should cause the least amount of harm, and that it's possible to make a good living on a living planet. Their hemp workwear is durable enough to outlast the toughest jobs and keeps you protected from the elements year-round. If I may editorialize for a second, my iron forged canvas ranch jacket from Patagonia Workwear is one of the most important winter tools I have on this farm. And I love that Patagonia Workwear is supplied by people like hemp and organic cotton farmers who care about soil. I mean, the idea of ecologically minded farmers growing clothes for other ecologically minded farmers just rules. It just rules. To learn more, click the link in the show notes. You rock. Okay, so that thing I said that was wildly important to building and maintaining a resilient farm is diversification. Diversity from top to bottom. Of course, I am talking about crop diversity, but also if you're planning to make a living off said farm, market diversity, income stream diversity, diversity of seed sources, diversity of inputs, diversity. For crops, diversity makes sense because if it's a wet year, your tomatoes may not do well, but your lettuce might. Or maybe it's your cucumbers and watermelons. Or maybe a pest or disease hits that just happens to ravage one crop. At least you have 5 or 10 other ones to help buoy the business while you figure out what happened. It's hedging your bets, but sometimes like literally with hedges. For diversity of markets, going all in on one market stream may pay off in some years, but like we all learned in the pandemic, market outlets and access to those outlets can change almost overnight. But it doesn't have to be a pandemic. Farmers market can lose its lease and move to a less favorable spot, or it can just be one of those summers where it rains every Saturday you're at the farmers market. Or maybe you're out west and smoke fills the air for months on end, keeping a lot of customers indoors. If you're relying on one specific market outlet, those sales will not be the same year after year. A restaurant or retailer can just up and close without any notice. In other words, I get the temptation to just dive fully into your easiest and most profitable market stream, and we've kind of done that from time to time, but you just never know what tomorrow will bring, so having a diversity of outlets is a strength for your farm as much as your diversity is for your investments, for your diet, for conversations with friends, for communities. A farm is only as strong as it is diverse. Though I should emphasize there are limits to that. Don't grow every crop and raise every animal. Raise and grow a diversity of complementary items that share infrastructure or growing practices. Tunnel tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers and eggplants can all share a lot of the same trellising equipment, for example. Arugula, baby kale, lettuce, and spinach all share some similar needs for planting and harvesting, but are a few different crop families. So it's diverse, but it's not so diverse that you're being overwhelmed by all the things you'd have to remember and have to grow like 100 different crops. Next, on the soil management side, well, first, where you locate your production area is going to play a big role in your farm's resilience. Straight up. If you're in a creek bottom or floodplain at all, and this assumes you have a choice because not all of us do, but bottomland is not always going to be the most resilient land to farm, even though it's often the best soil. 100-year floods are no longer obviously really waiting 100 years. On the opposite side of the coin, being up on the ridgetop in wind-prone areas can wreak absolute havoc on your gardens, on your infrastructure, on the health of your plants and animals. If you use tarps and row cover, then expect the wind to develop an artistic gymnastics routine with them. Our last farm was on a ridgetop, and not only was it borderline impossible to keep anything in place, sun and wind exposure made growing delicate plants like lettuce that much more challenging. Things grow faster than they do on our now more shaded farm, but they also died faster. We have to do our harvests early here, but harvests had to be done even earlier there, even faster. Respecting not only the typical climate that you live in, but the extreme potential climate is important to building a resilient farm as well. However, you often have to work with what you have. So land access is one of those things. Like, obviously most of us do not get to choose where we farm or what the land looks like. But if you have your choice, think very hard about where you're going to put your gardens. The key to resilience there will be in the planning. Maybe that means hedgerows to block wind, or some sort of physical drainage or fortification to prevent flooding. There is no one size fits all here. Like every answer in farming, context is, annoyingly, everything. Of course, not all of you will have to worry about torrential rain stealing your soil, but all of us have to be concerned with soil erosion of some kind. Rain can erode soil, obviously, but so too can wind. Even the sun can erode soil to some extent by drying out the soil organic matter that binds the soil particles and keeps them in place. Plastics are not always thought of as sources of erosion, but especially disposable plastics hauled off to the dump can contain large quantities of soil. Obviously, this channel has produced an unending amount of content on proper soil management, and there is also the Living Soil Handbook, which, when you purchase that from no-till growers, helps to support our work. But the keys are simple. Keep the soil covered with mulches and living plants as much as you can. Keep it planted in general as much as you can with a diversity of crop species, and disturb the soil as little as humanly possible in your context. Though what that looks like changes based on the farm, the approach stays the same. Another tip that I don't say enough is the importance of only farming what you can manage well. Leaving a bunch of soil tilled up and exposed is not just a waste of time and money, but also of ecology. It may still happen sometimes that you have bit off a little bit more than you can chew, proverbially, probably not biting the soil, in which case, get that area in cover crop ASAP or covered in some way. Speaking of cover crops, I love them for all the reasons. I'm a fan of anything that not only feeds the soil, but keeps the soil where it's supposed to be, and cover crops are amazing at that. Plants, and in particular cover crops, are profoundly well suited for this task. Plus, even in heavy rain events, they are able to protect the soil, move the water through the soil, preserve some of that moisture in their roots and in the plants themselves, and keep the soil particles put. In a drier climate, they offer many of the same benefits, preserving the water from the rainy season in the form of plant material, but also cool the soil with shade. Cover crops are generally just an effective way to build soil organic matter, feed soil microbes, increase microbial diversity and soil respiration, and potentially have some bonus mulches. Plus, beneficials really dig them. And I dig things that beneficials dig. Here's a recent and perhaps timely cover crop video to start with if you're looking for guidance on these amazing plants, but that you also like your growing information with a side of dad jokes. Somehow, even my references to dad jokes are dad jokes. Now, you may think that a farmer's biggest enemy in terms of common natural elements is rain or drought, but for me, wind. Wind is the worst. Wind is the most stressful of all the elements, though admittedly I don't live in the West, where I'm sure fire would be pretty high on that list. For us though, everything we build has to be really wind resistant. Like, we cannot get the basic cat tunnels that don't have the wind bracing, and we can't half-heartedly install said bracing because, well, I learned that lesson the hard way a few years back. Now our tunnels are well secured with all the wind bracing, the center purlin, the trusses, all the things. Also, any tarps or landscape fabric need to be weighted down extremely well. I don't recommend what I use, which is basically whatever is lying around. These last few years, that has been the stakes from our pepper and tomato plants, because what the heck else are they doing all year? But they can tear holes in the plastic, so maybe not the best choice. Farmer's Friend sells these bags that make a lot of sense. Get a load of sand or gravel and stuff those things full. It's a good winter project. With the winter coming up here, it may not be the worst. In effect, any infrastructure you build or any tools you use should be protected from whatever the worst case scenario is in your climate. Also, invest in yourself and your relationships with not only your partner or partners in the business, which yes, includes your spouse, children, in-laws, etc., but your customers and your friends and community as well. We invest in our community physically by coaching soccer, which has made us a lot of local friends and acquaintances in a situation that maybe that wouldn't happen. I'm not the most social person. Nothing fortifies a farm quite like having that local support, though, in a disaster. Simultaneously, we've seen through Hurricane Helene how some farms are able to help others in their community. Community is a big underappreciated part of resilience. As I've said many times on this channel, there is no such thing as self-sufficiency. There's community sufficiency and insufficiency. So focus on those things because that could become incredibly important in terms of your farm's resilience. There are obviously a lot of other little tidbits I could dive into here on the topic of resilience, but I will save those nuanced details for our new show, Growers Daily, the daily podcast I now do here on this channel every day of the week on YouTube, but also that goes up on the No-Till Growers Network podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. So definitely subscribe to that, to this, to whatever, because there is new content basically every day of the week, from interviews to just me ranting like this, but like more, which if you made it this far, clearly you're down with. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or a hat or other merch to support our work at no-tillgrowers.com. Join the Patreon page at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where Patreon members get to help guide the content we make. Like this video if you like this video. If you are not subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, you're awesome. You can also hit that super thanks button if that's your speed. Otherwise, super thanks for watching. Super thanks to Patagonia Workwear for their sponsorship and support of farmers. Super thanks to you. We'll see you later. Bye.